Hello, nonprofit leaders. I'm Sarah Olivieri, your host, and this podcast is here to assist people like you, executive directors, board members, and other nonprofit leaders make a bigger impact with insights, tips, and lessons learned from nonprofit leaders and experts. Having been an executive director, a board member, and now a consultant and coach, I truly understand the challenges you face. And that's why I'm here. I'm all about working smarter, not harder, so you can make a bigger impact without the burnout. And so is our sponsor, DonorBox. DonorBox isn't just a suite of helpful fundraising tools, it's a partner that helps you raise more money and supports you in retaining your donors. I love their forward-thinking approach. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. And don't forget to sign up for the Inspired Nonprofit Leadership newsletter, where you'll get bite-sized, actionable tips just for nonprofit leaders like you, delivered weekly to your inbox. Sign up at inspirednonprofitleadership.com/sign up. Okay, let's dive into today's episode. My guest for this episode is Dr. Stanley Andrisse, who is an endocrinologist, scientist, and assistant professor at Howard University College of Medicine, researching type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. Now, you may be wondering what he's doing on this podcast, but just hang tight, because Dr. Andrisse, in addition to being a visiting faculty at Georgetown University Medical Center, is also the founder and executive director of From Prison Cells to PhD and vice president of the board of the formerly incarcerated college graduates network. So he is an expert in two fields. Welcome, Stanley. It's such a pleasure to have you here. Before we dive into things nonprofit leadership, we just share a little more about yourself personally so we can get to know you as a whole person.
Yes, thank you so much. It's such a great honor to be here with you. So I am Stanley Andrisse. What brings me to the show is, as you mentioned, I'm a nonprofit leader. And how I became a nonprofit leader of an organization called From Prison Cells to PhD, I myself am a formerly incarcerated person with 3 felony convictions. I was sentenced to 10 years in prison as a prior and persistent career criminal. I actually had a prosecutor pushing for 20 years to life in prison because she felt that this young Black male had no hope for change. Fast forward some time, I did my time. I'm now, as the intro just mentioned, Dr. Stanley Andrisse, endocrinologist scientist. And I guess maybe I sent over a slightly old bio. I'm now a tenured associate professor at Howard University College of Medicine. To our knowledge, as pretty connected to this community of directly impacted formerly incarcerated scholars. And to our knowledge, I am the first formerly incarcerated Black male tenured professor at a medical school in our country. And then along that journey...
Before you just hop over that, just a really big congratulations. I can only begin to imagine from my knowledge of the prison system and racism in our country, you have it's hard enough to achieve that professional status, but to have done it through your journey. I mean, I just want to honor you as a true superhuman, a blessing I don't usually give out. I'm usually like, as much as you'd like to think you have superpowers, you don't. But I suspect you may actually have superpowers. But keep going. Tell us more about yourself.
Well, first, thank you for the amazing compliment. And yes, so, I hope to maybe get a little bit more into how mentorship played a big role in me being where I am. But then along the journey, I realized that people who have had experiences like mine, may not have been fortunate to have the mentorship that I very kind of unexpectedly acquired in my journey. So I created a nonprofit about 7 years ago, From Prison Cells to PhD, that runs a program called the Prison to Professional Scholars Program that essentially provides mentorship, community, coaching, scholarships, and guidance for people currently and formerly incarcerated men and women to pursue higher education. And I look forward to telling you and your audience a little bit more about some of that great work.
Yeah. So, and I am looking forward to hearing it. I'd love to kind of pull on that thread. What kind, tell me about how you got introduced to having a mentor. And because I think this is such a powerful model, and so many, like, if you dig into stories of successful nonprofit CEOs and very much so in the for profit space, you quickly hear like almost every successful, like, CEO, creator of a business had some really great mentors along the way
Yeah.
who helped them think things through and open doors through introductions. So tell me your journey of being mentored and getting a mentor.
Yes, thank you for that question. So when I was sentenced to 10 years in prison and, I started my 10-year prison sentence, I very much in order to get sentenced to that type of time, you had to have made some, potentially made some poor decisions. In my case, I had made some poor decisions. And, to get that level of time, you have to, in most cases, a prosecutor says some pretty, bad stuff about who you are as a person, because that's the way that they can get the judge and jury convince them to sentence someone to that amount of time. So, I understand the prosecutor's doing her job, but what that does is for people like myself, I went into prison very much feeling as if I was this dangerous threat to society, this hopeless case, this person that was going to be in this revolving door of incarceration. And so I was moving in that way. I was moving in this space, in this, emotional, psychological space of brokenness, and that I was, there was no way to repair me. But I was fortunate enough to have this mentor step into my life that really saw me differently. He started investing in my potential and my talent and my abilities, and really helped me understand, who I was, and, the qualities and value that I could bring to myself, to the world, and to others. And so that also, that tied with, over the course of the first couple of years I was incarcerated, my father went through a number of hospitalizations, surgeries, amputations,
Mm.
and ended up losing his battle with type 2 diabetes. And this mentor handed me my first scientific article on diabetes. And, to, anyone listening who may have never picked up a scientific article, every other word is something you've never heard of before.
They're dense.
And prison doesn't afford you the opportunity to hop on Google, WebMD, and definitely ChatGPT was not around back then. So it would take me months and months to get through these scientific articles. But what it did, although my body was physically locked in a prison cell, my mind was freely roaming around the human cell. And that way I was free. So my mind was free much longer, before my body was physically free. And so this mentor really poured, this person is still in my life, but he was really this person that helped me see myself differently and helped
Mm.
me understand my talents and skills and ability, and, was persistent in really encouraging me to use those to bring, good into the world, into my world, into my community. And so, that person helped me kind of turn around my thinking of who I was.
Yeah. What a powerful story, and such a clear example of how what other people say about us can really change how we think about ourselves. I mean, you first had what the prosecutor was saying about you give you a very negative self view and impact your ability to do stuff for yourself in your mind, even if your body was in prison. And then you had somebody help you see a different view of yourself. And I've never made this connection before in my mind, but as you were saying that, I was like, oh my God, in so many ways, great mentorship is like someone who does great personal branding, right? Like they help identify like your secret sauce and what you're really good at and put words to it and
Yeah.
put it out in the world in a way that other people are like, oh, I see this amazing, talented person as well. And you believe it even more.
Yes.
What a gift you received. And no wonder you have wanted to pass it on.
Yes.
And at the same time, you had this very personal experience with your father and engaging you in the world of science. I can imagine that helped you start to regain a sense of control over what must have felt very out of control, losing your father to type 2 diabetes.
Yes, yes, most definitely. It was, losing a loved one is very emotionally difficult. And it was, I didn't know it at the time, but, I was reading those articles as really kind of a coping mechanism because I wasn't, I can go into, a pretty dense conversation around how in prisons aren't built for people to be human and express normal human feelings and emotions like anger, sadness, depression, crying, and all these types of things can usually bring harm a person's way, so you can't emotionally grieve. And this was almost a coping grieving mechanism as I was, and I didn't know that it was that, but I was using these articles in that way.
Yeah. So I want to take two threads here. I want to ask you about, what you've learned, becoming a nonprofit leader, but I also want to ask you about, what are those specific challenges and misconceptions coming out of incarceration? So I'll let you choose which direction to start in, and I'll make sure we hit the other one too.
So I think maybe this offers me an opportunity to kind of think about what a question that I often get asked a lot, and I think it ties into both of your questions about I often, the work that we do, we interact with a lot of currently and formerly incarcerated people that we help them rebrand themselves. We help them reimagine who they are and what they can be. And in that process, a lot of people end up wanting to bring good into the world and start nonprofits. So, we've helped a lot of people actually start various projects, nonprofits, and businesses. And so, I I just want to help answer that question. Maybe think about the idea of the passion behind starting the nonprofit. It was really looking at my own experience and a couple of other people that I was incarcerated with, and seeing what worked. So we saw that mentorship worked. So I had this mentor. What I hadn't shared yet is that a couple of the co-founders, when I was inside and I would tell them like I'm going to get out and be a doctor, they were like, "You're crazy. We're at a maximum security prison. What are you talking about?" And eventually, when it started happening, I got out before a couple of these friends that I'm referring to, and I started helping them do what this mentor did for me and
Mm.
helping expand their belief of who they were. And I helped them get out and get into school. And then we started doing that with a couple of other people we were incarcerated with. So we saw that mentorship was part of the solution. We saw that building a community of, like-minded people with experiences, with similar experiences, were part of it. So mentorship, community, and then, we knew that providing access to individuals, so helping people understand how to get access to higher education, how to connect, and for us to be that access, we were able to advocate for them. So, I mean, from that, we helped just a couple of us some friends that we were incarcerated with, and we took that, in of about 10 people that we helped successfully, and, we started a business around community mentorship and access. And 7 years later, we've had over 3,000 people apply to the program, over 1,000 currently and formerly incarcerated men and women go through the program and successfully move on to amazing careers and career paths. And so I tell people that are trying to start this thing is it has to, you have to be passionate about it, and it helps if you have this understanding of how the mechanics work. And we had this
Mm.
very deep understanding of how those three things can successfully help people recreate themselves and reimagine themselves after incarceration.
Yeah, you have that lived experience and the peer experience. And so you've built up a pretty decent sized organization at this point, in addition to being an active teacher and researcher and all these things. Tell us roughly, like for the other leaders out there, so they can get a sense, how big is prison cell, from prison cells to PhD, like as an organization, budget wise, staff wise, like just give us a little lay of the land.
Yeah, that maybe. maybe I'll answer that question.
And there's no wrong answer
No, yeah,
here, but
no,
I
no, no.
like people to
No, I'm
know
just gonna
because,
answer it
yeah.
from where we were a year ago and then where we are now, because
Hmm.
the work that we do has been greatly impacted in this past year. So a year ago, we were at an FTE of we were at an FTE of 16, and
Okay.
that made there was about 10 full-time employees, and then we had about 20 part-time contractors that are instructors and facilitators that we
Yep.
come in to teach the
So
courses.
you're leading a team of 30, but it's, okay, that
Yeah,
helps. Yep.
yeah.
Budget
So,
wise.
and then, and
Got it.
budget wise, we were, we had just secured a $12 million 10-year government contract, another
Mm.
$5 million 5-year government contract, and another $3 million 5-year government contract.
I'm about to hear a sad story, aren't I?
Yes, 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 yes. So, and
What
then
happened?
we
Mhm.
have, we have a number of foundational support too. But
Yeah.
within the past year, those three grants that make up, collectively close to 20 million, they were going to bring in collectively close to 20 million over about 10 years. We lost all of them. They all got cut because, during the, Doge cuts, we argued, we really don't use race ethnicity. We work with people of
I'm
all.
sure the prison system does that for you.
Exactly, exactly. So, but I guess they put two and two together of like, yeah, none of your grants and the projects that were funded use race ethnicity, but they knew the population we serve is about 80% people of color.
So skewed. Yeah.
So, even though we weren't using that language in our grants, they still cut us because they felt that it fell into the realm. So that,
That's so, I mean, I think that whole thing is unfortunate, but it's like extra unfortunate, like economically, like Doge was supposed to be out making things better, like keeping people like from returning to prison
yeah,
worth so much money, right? They actually would have saved after that 20 million
exactly.
big time. I don't have the stats off the top of my head. I bet you know much more than I do, like the cost to incarcerate somebody,
Yes, the
like
cost
is
to, I mean, the cost to incarcerate someone is about 5 times more costly than it is to put them through college. So, I mean,
that
we,
like per year or per like each
so
sentence?
the cost per year of incarcerating a person, providing them, and the cost goes up as a person gets older and they need
Mm.
more medical care and different medications. But yes, that is referring to like the cost per year of a state college, their 1 year tuition compared to the 1 year it costs to incarcerate someone, which it can cost up to 80
So
to a hundred
basically, like
thousand
1 year of incarceration would cover an entire
on
undergraduate
undergraduate.
degree and then some at a state college.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So, with that 20 million, we could have saved the government, $100 million or more by the
Wow.
people, the lives that we've saved, and, help from going back to prison. But yeah, so we're now at an FTE of 7 with 3 full-time individuals and about still about 15 part-time individuals. So we had to
Yeah.
cut nearly, 7 full-time and some other part-time positions. So, I mean, more than half of our, workforce was cut.
Hmm.
But we are still in a good position. I mean, it's not a good position in that we had to make the tough decision of impacting, there's the hundreds, thousands of people's lives that were going to be impacted by the work that we were going to do that we didn't get to do. But then, of course, as nonprofit leaders that I'm speaking to know, then there's, of course, the staff, the impact on their families and their children and their children's education, and the
Yeah.
difficulty, that it's been a difficult year in that regard to have to cut that many people.
Yeah. So, how are you shifting your leadership and funding strategy as you adapt to this new
So yes,
dynamic?
we've been fortunate to, we live in a state that is a very unique state in this current space. Our governor, Governor Wes Moore, not to get too political. But Governor Wes Moore was the only governor that was not allowed to the governor's ball at the White House, and he didn't. Governor Moore didn't kind of speculate as to why, but he's also the only black governor in our country. So he didn't say that that was why. That could have been. Also, what could have been is Maryland has been kind of, him, the governor, and our mayor, Brandon Scott of Baltimore City, another young black male, has been very vocal about not allowing, some of the things that this administration is doing around the country to take place in Maryland. But so I say all that to say that the federal government took away close to 20 million from us. The Baltimore City government actually, I got a random call one Friday night as I was writing grants frantically to kind of deal with, this challenge that we're in. And it was the city council member telling me you really need to take my call, and I was like, I'm trying to get some money, I'm writing grants, like I can't talk to you now. And he just kept texting back and said, you really just need to talk to me for 30 seconds. So I pick up the call, and he patches in the mayor's office, and they were awarding our organization $1 million. No.
Good thing you took that call.
And so we've gotten some money from them, and we've pivoted to foundational support, because a lot of foundations understand the challenge that nonprofits are facing, given nonprofits doing the kind of work that we do. So we also got a 1.8 million grant from the Mellon Foundation, and some of our people like the Able Foundation and Annie E. Casey Foundation. They've always supported us. And so some of our baseline things that we do has continued to be funded by foundations.
Yeah. And do you have like major donors in the mix as well?
That is, as I think about questions to ask you and your expertise of meeting with so many leaders, our nonprofit has never moved into the space of getting major donations from individuals. So we've relied heavily on we've been very fortunate to get some of these very large government contracts and grants, and very fortunate to get a number of, we've gotten funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, from Chan Zuckerberg, from the Chan Zuckerberg CZI, from Mellon Foundation, Able Foundation, Annie E. Casey Foundation, Bloomberg Philanthropy, but we haven't tapped into the individual donors. We have began working with a consultant who specializes in tapping into that
Mm-hmm.
arena, but haven't had much success just yet.
Well, we can absolutely talk offline about it, but because I suspect there are a lot of listeners kind of asking the same questions, actually, I encourage folks, if you're just kind of starting out, start with the major donors. And I like to call it like the funding cake. And first is major donors, then is all the rest of the individual donors, then is potentially like corporate sponsorships if they're right for you. I lump in planned giving with the major donors, and then grants as the icing on the cake. And I think in your situation, the fact that you have been so successful with grants so early on is probably a product of you're really good at telling your story, and you have a mission and a model that just makes so much sense. Like we talked about, like the financial savings alone. So like whether or not you're in it for saving the economy for all of us, or the sense of justice that you might feel around the biases in the prison system, or you just like to see people who've, been through a difficult time, like rise above, like the Phoenix rising, like whatever mindset you're coming from, like there's something there for almost every kind of donor mindset, if you will. But what I love about major gifts giving is you end up with donors who want to stick with you for life, right? Most foundations, most government funding is concerned that you are not dependent on them. They're not like, they're like, we'll date for a year or two, maybe 3, 5 if you're lucky, but then, no commitment, you better be on your way. Whereas the major donors, like once they get into it, they're like, let's get married. I'm going to be with you forever.
Yeah.
Plus, their gifts are unrestricted, typically, if you do it well. So you have an unrestricted dollar is worth more than a restricted dollar.
Yeah.
Like you have the flexibility to change with it, stay really closely aligned to your mission. So you get these dedicated donors. So with unrestricted dollars, so the lifetime value goes way up. And then, I mean, how many foundations go around saying, hey, like, we gave this organization a grant. My friend foundation, you should give them a grant too.
Yeah.
Like, not
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
but that's what major donors do. They go around to their friends and become like ambassadors and champions saying like, I'm in and you should join us too. So it actually is way more scalable than you might initially think. And it only takes a small handful of people giving 50,000, 100,000 or $1 million a pop to really add up and fund some good work. And they are often not swayed, when the government changes its tune, right? And this has been a drastic experience that we've had with the government. But the reality of politics is all politicians, at least in this country, have limited terms, at least for now, right? And so the normal rhythm of the system is every so many years,
Yes.
there will be a new set of opinions with differing educations and backgrounds. And so federal funding, city funding, town, government funding is always going to
Playing back.
kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to swing. It's going to be a roller coaster ride. And why do it if you don't have to do it? That being said, I've run into a lot of folks who've I've worked with a fundraising consultant and it hasn't really been working. And there are better ways and less effective ways to get started with major gifts. So if you're having a difficult time, it could be just a bad fit, just like it can be easy to, have a bad fit hire. You don't get every hire right. And the other thing I'll just say is major gifts can take a bit to get rolling, right? Because we want to build good relationships with people before we start asking them to give large sums of money.
Yeah.
And so it might take 12 or 18 months of building relationship. But on the other end of that waiting is maybe $1 million check and much more to come over their lifetime. So it can feel less glamorous at first, and usually nobody knows you're doing it. So it's one of the things I've found is kind of a secret in the nonprofit spaces. All the successfully, like really well-funded nonprofits I know, they all have incredible major giving programs and they invest in that. And you don't see it from the outside, right?
Right.
Because there's no campaign, there's nothing on social media. You don't know that they're having coffee with, Billy Bob billionaire, right? Who's about to cut them another $50,000 check. But we see the other things, right? We see the grant awards, we see the campaigns on Giving Tuesday, and we think that's the thing, but it's not
Yeah.
really the main thing for most organizations. That's my 2 cents on
No,
major.
no, that is, I couldn't agree more. And what I would add to that is, and the challenge that I feel like we've been facing is, our funding partners that we have really value the work that we do and think we're doing. I mean, particularly when we first started, no one else was doing what we were doing.
Yeah.
Everyone was not, we kind of, one of our models is that we want to move away from thinking that if you've been to prison, you need to come out and put on a construction hat.
Mm.
We have, folks who've gotten their PhD in astrophysics. We have nurse anesthetists. We have, PhDs in business and English and all these different things. So no one was really thinking about people who've come from prison not putting on construction hats. Like that's a lot. There was a
Yeah.
lot of that around, and we were kind of the only ones doing what we were doing. And now there's a couple more people. Not so much. We're still very much one of the only people doing it the way that we do. But what and so when people learn about what we were doing, funders were like opening, like we have a very like high success rate of getting grants. But so the challenge with the major gifts is that when people learn about what we do, they want to like be a part of it. We have problems getting into the rooms of those major donors.
Yeah.
So we just really haven't, and the ones that we do know, there it's mostly through some other formerly incarcerated networks, and so they already have that formerly incarcerated person that's doing something really cool that they're funding.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
I'm so glad you brought that up for our listeners because I think it is that getting those first relationships, if you really don't have any, although sometimes there are some hiding ones in there. I had a client once who, I was like, you got to find your Vanderbilts and your Roosevelts. And she's like, I've got to call so and so Vanderbilt. I'm like, well, if you have an actual Vanderbilt, yes. But, and sometimes there are people very wealthy on our list who we don't know about, and we can use list wealth screening tools to help identify who of our contacts actually have the capability to give. Otherwise, when we're really building from scratch, the thing about people with a lot of wealth is in order to protect themselves because they are easy targets. They get targeted a lot. I shouldn't say they're easy targets. They protect themselves. They put up walls of protection. They have gatekeepers, through phones as well as like physical gates. But once you get in through the wall,
yeah,
they share their networks. And if you have a referral, a recommendation from a friend, you are like in the club. So that initial kind of like knocking on doors, seeing who you can build a relationship with can feel like a lot of no's. It can feel really painstaking. But once you get your first one and you're really just looking for that first one,
yeah,
and they will introduce you to number two and number three. And now you expand out from those networks and it gets easier and easier because each one can make introductions and get you into the door. And then before you know it, you are at the events where there's lots of people to connect with. But that initial experience it just feels hard. It feels hard. And I encourage folks to like work with a coach or a friend or somebody who can like just help you keep going. I'm sure would be a great mentor for this, right? Like I'm sure
yeah.
you've experienced times when it felt hard and everything was against you and you had pushed through anyway, even though you had a bunch of doors shut in your face. Does that sound familiar?
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah. So those are the skills you need to make it through that initial phase. But once you have, money is a phone call away almost any day of the week.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap up because I could go on, I think, a long time chatting you with about these things. For folks who are listening to your story, thinking they want to help or they are interested in learning more about your mentorship model, maybe they're thinking about starting an incarceration program. Because like you said, I have seen way too many programs helping people like, I don't know, learn how to fill out a resume or like do a job interview. And I always feel like we got to do a little more than that. Like, let's set our sights a little higher
Yeah.
than just
Yeah.
how to have an interview. What kind of folks should be reaching out to you, and what's the best way to do that?
So I think, well, not I think, if you are interested in really exploring how you can, support this population, individuals who have been previously incarcerated, and really with the ideas I was mentioning of helping them excel beyond what society and circumstances has set to be the norm, then we encourage you to reach out. You can find us at info@prison2pro.org is the email address. And you can find us on all socials at Prison to Pro on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. I believe we're also on Snapchat and TikTok recently. And yeah, encourage you to reach out, learn a little bit more about the work we do. We also just recently published a book. The book is Breaking Chains, Building Futures. It was through a podcast like this that our publisher Wiley, learned about the work that we do and the people that we are helping to turn their lives around, and wanted me to write a book about that. And I, turned that around and said, I would love to do that, but I think it would be more appropriate to have the actual voices. So they agreed to that. And so it's a collection of authors. We put out a call for applications, and there's 13 different authors. You can learn more about the work that we do through these very intimate stories told by the actual individuals.
Wonderful. And you have, besides yourself, don't you have other of your participants, former success stories who are available for speaking engagements? Do I remember that
Yes.
correctly?
Yeah. So we
Mm-hmm.
also have a speakers bureau where we essentially help connect, particularly what we've learned is, and what we want to try to address is really helping. We often get called to the table, people with, criminal histories. We get called to tables when academic institutions are writing big $10 million grants. We get called to events when foundations are telling about the great work that they do. And so we get, called to tell stories about our experiences. And we learn that oftentimes that is not compensated. So, I mean, that's really what we wanted to activate people to understand and help organizations looking for those types of voices that, there should be compensation attached to that and helping. So we help people tell their stories in settings like that.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Stanley, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. And thank you out there for listening, everything you do to make our communities better. And until next time, I wish you all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.